So okay, let's start from the beginning. What is vCloud Air? vCloud Air is simply a data center for rent. I'm not going to bother reading this big description, which is just kind of a marketecture type of description of what vCloud Air is. Simply put, it's a data center for rent, a place where you can reside your VMs. We, VMware, manage all the infrastructure and management of that data center, where you can just place your VMs, again, making your life a lot easier because you don't have to maintain all that hardware and software infrastructure. So here you see, starting from the bottom, VMware manages the infrastructure, the hardware and the facilities, the infrastructure management, the compute, storage, and networking security aspect of it, as well as providing OS catalogs and application catalogs and a GUI front end for you to manage it. And then the only thing that you need to worry about is to bring your VMs, your tools, and any of your licensing. And that's all you have to worry about. So again, it is a data center for rent. Less overhead and management for your customers to have to deal with. Now, vCloud Air, we have many data centers, as you can see, across the world. We have several in the United States, California, Nevada, Texas, New Jersey, and Virginia. Then we also have them in the UK, Europe, Germany rather, Japan, and Australia. And we also have, as you see in the blue dots here, are the vCloud government services. These data center locations are specifically set up to meet certain security and compliance standards that are set forth by the government. So those data centers are specifically for our government type clients. So those are the data center locations, and those are continually expanding at all times. You're going to see that, especially over in other parts of the world outside the U.S., we'll expand additional data centers as time goes on. Now, vCloud Air's core offerings are three core offerings. First, we have the vCloud Air dedicated cloud. This is physically isolated, and you have your own private cloud instance. Then you have the virtual private cloud, which is logically isolated, and but we guarantee you that resource allocation. And then we also have disaster recovery. So those are our three primary, core offerings that vCloud Air services. Now, those kind of expand, and there's more to that, and I'll cover that in a little bit here. But these are our core offerings with vCloud Air. And then recently, for our virtual private cloud, we've now started offering OnDemand. Now, OnDemand is a pay-as-you-go. Basically, you as a partner or a customer can go out and swipe a credit card, and you can go ahead and get started and start using our vCloud Air virtual private OnDemand services. As you see, it's metered by per minute, billed monthly on your actual consumption only, so you're only getting billed for what you use. There's no minimums, and there's no upfront resource commitment costs at all. So again, that's a pay-as-you-go, pay for what you use only. So that is our on-demand for our virtual private cloud instance. Now, the main benefits that you get with vCloud Air, and especially when you're talking about in conjunction with a customer of yours that may have a vSphere environment, an on-premise data center. When you get a vCloud Air instance, the great thing about it is that it's all built on vSphere. So everything is the same. So if you look at these different examples here, for any new and existing applications that you may have, these can be easily migrated from your vSphere on-premise environment out to your vCloud Air instance, because again, it's all built on the same vSphere technology and software. So there's no rewriting of code or anything to migrate your applications, whether it be old or new, between your on-premise data center and your vCloud Air instance. Networking is the same thing, again, because you're using the same networking infrastructure that you're using with your vSphere environment. Set up your vCloud Air instance for the appropriate networking, and then you can migrate VMs back and forth between your on-premise data center and your vCloud Air instance. All your management utilities, such as the vSphere web client, if you're running vRealize operations or anything like that, again, all of these, vCloud Air is going to be seen as an endpoint within those interfaces, so those admins are using the same tools that they already know and love. There's no learning curve to learning newer different management utilities just because you have a cloud-based instance. You're still going to use those same utilities. So again, less of a learning curve, no additional cost for training for your admins. We also, one thing that I feel gets underplayed a lot is the one support call. Because vCloud Air is VMware, and it's all based on that same vSphere technology, if you have a problem with either your on-premise environment or your cloud-based environment, or maybe you're having issues and you're not sure whether is a problem residing on the on-premise or in the vCloud Air instance, you only have one service call that you have to make. With any other cloud provider, you might get stuck into that loop. And I know when I was an admin before, whenever you had different vendors, sometimes you'd get in that ping pong type game approach where you call in for support because you have a problem. They send you over to the other vendor because they say, no, it's not our problem, it's the other vendor's problem. You call that other vendor, and then they say the same thing back to the original vendor, and you get that ping pong back and forth on whose problem is it. And it wastes a lot of time. Your services are down during that time, which is not a good thing. So again, one service call, no matter whether it's on-premise or vCloud Air instance. So a huge benefit there. And basically any application, any place, no changes. Again, no rewrites of code, no changing network properties, nothing like that at all. Again, like I was saying about the management interfaces for the admins, they don't have a learning curve because they're still using those same interfaces. As you see here in the upper left-hand image, you have the vCloud Hybrid Service plugin. This is right from your vSphere web client. You can manage your vCloud Air instances right from the vSphere web client. So again, very easy to manage, nothing new to learn, less time, less money. So let's get into the use cases around vCloud Air, different ways in which you can use and consume vCloud Air. Now, this slide here presents many of the different ways in which you can consume and those use cases for vCloud Air. As you see, the first one being dev test, the second one being package applications such as Microsoft Exchange and SharePoint, disaster recovery, new enterprise applications, those three-tier web app type of applications running out in the cloud potentially, and then next-gen applications as well, which are usually based around a mobile app, and then again, those applications are running out in the cloud. So let's take a little bit deeper look into each one of these categories, and I'm going to kind of group them together a little bit different. So starting off, one of the big use cases that you'll find when you're talking to your customers is for dev test environments. Now, typically with a dev test environment, you have to have separate hardware software environment. You have that additional management overhead to manage that additional environment for testing. And you also have that associated CapEx and OpEx associated to, again, that additional hardware and software that has to be purchased. The developers need to have the flexibility to be able to spin up and spin down VMs as needed typically, depending on what they're testing. So they need that flexibility. And of course, it needs to accommodate both existing or older applications as well as any new applications that they develop. So with using vCloud Air as a dev test environment, a lot of the benefits are, of course, again, the lower TCO because you don't have to pay for all that initial CapEx as well as that ongoing OpEx to maintain that separate environment. Less administrative overhead because, again, you're not having to manage all that infrastructure. You can set it up to where developers can create as needed. And again, because it's all built on that same vSphere technology, there's no recoding of those applications. There are some other cloud vendors where if you create a new application out in their environment and then you try to bring that back into your on-premise environment, it's going to take a lot of recoding of that application to make that happen, and that's time and money. But with vCloud Air, you don't have to worry about that. Again, it's all based on vSphere. So that's the first major one that you'll probably talk to customers about. The second one, which is very popular, especially for your SMB type of individuals, is for disaster recovery. Again, disaster recovery, same thing. Disaster recovery, typically you need a whole other environment, that hardware and software, you got the associated administrative overhead, and that CapEx and OpEx that we talked about with dev test as well, same concept. And then you need to have the ability to be able to fail over and fail back between your on-prem data center and vCloud Air. So with vCloud Air disaster recovery, again, because it's based on that same vSphere technology, it's very easy to fail over and fail back between your on-prem and your vCloud Air disaster recovery instance. Many of the benefits, again, very similar. Greatly reduce your CapEx and OpEx. Less administrative overhead because you're not managing that other environment. Because remember, VMware maintains all that infrastructure for you. no recoding of the applications, no network configuration changes for when you fail over and have to fail back. And again, it also accommodates those old and new applications. So those are going to be your two primary use cases that you're probably going to end up getting into conversations with your end customers when you're talking about vCloud Air and anything relating to their needs in regard to cloud-based services. Now, to touch on applications, again, these older applications, an example that you may find is, and I've actually experienced this before, where you have a company where they have a group of developers, they developed an application in-house. That developer is no longer there 10 years later. Nobody knows that application and how to recode it to update it to the newer operating systems to work in the newer environments. So they have to maintain these older OS, like say maybe 2003 OS server that this application runs on. Well, vCloud Air supports more operating systems than any other cloud provider. So no matter how old your applications are, whether it's running on an old maybe 2003 server or maybe even runs on some MS-DOS or anything like that, we are compatible with more operating systems than anybody else. So you won't have that issue with vCloud Air. Newer applications, again, a lot of times those developers are wanting to go ahead and burst out into the cloud and do some development out in the cloud. And again, any of those applications can run on vCloud Air because, again, it's all the same vSphere environment. No recoding of those applications once they're developed out in vCloud Air to bring them back in-house in your on-prem data centers, no recoding there. Those next-gen applications, typically based around mobile apps, same thing with that. Because of our flexibility and because everything's on vSphere, we can run those cloud-based and mobile apps out in vCloud Air with no issues. So again, we can accommodate all those newer types of programming platforms that those cloud-based and mobile apps are built on. So those are a little bit of information about applications and how flexible vCloud Air is, whether it be it's the old apps or the new or even the next gen, such as your mobile apps. Now, many environments, they have an existing data center, but they have projects that come in and they may not have the resources to be able to accommodate these new projects that come in. And they may not have the time to get and spin up these additional resources to accommodate these projects or any changes. Say if a company buys out another company, anything like that to where their IT environment needs to grow for any reason. So there's times to where your customers may need to be able to burst out and be able to consume some additional resources, but yet they just don't have the ability to spin up and either add to additional environment or an additional environment in general. Again, all that CapEx and OpEx. Now, a good example of this is think of your tax-related companies. For a majority of the year, they're not that busy. But then from, say, November to April, they do a huge amount of work during that time because that's tax season. So obviously, they need to be able to provide a lot more services during those 4 or 5 months, but yet the rest of the year they don't need all those resources. So from a cost perspective, to be able to burst out into the cloud and add those additional resources as needed, and then as soon as tax season's done, scale it back down again, that's a huge benefit for companies like this. So again, using vCloud Air, you can use that as a way to be able to burst out from your on-premise data center as needed. And then, of course, you run into lifecycle replacement. Those servers in your on-premise data center typically need to be replaced about every 3 to 5 years. A lot of companies are starting to reevaluate when they hit that lifecycle replacement of the hardware, whether it be servers or even storage or anything like that in their data center. When they hit that point to where they need to worry about lifecycle replacement, a lot of customers now are looking to go out to the cloud rather than replace their existing environment. So when you're talking to your customers, you may hear something relating to lifecycle replacement. If you do, it's a great idea to talk to them about cloud instead, and that may be something that they can move everything out to the cloud or maybe just a portion. So those are the existing use cases that we have right now. I want to talk about some upcoming use cases that we have because we're continually adding to our vCloud Air services and the different service offerings. Now, you may have heard that we purchased the company Continuent. Now, Continuent gives the capability of MySQL and Oracle high availability as well as DR capability. So you're going to see where when this service becomes fully available, we're going to be able to provide database for MySQL and Oracle, database services. We'll be able to provide that high availability for failover. It offers zero downtime. Again, it offers for disaster recovery as well, and including load balancing. So again, when you set up your databases for your applications in either high availability and provide DR for them, again, no revenue loss during that failure, that outage. It makes maintenance a lot easier. And again, just your overall cost and management of those environments and those applications will be much easier. And you're ensuring that you're meeting those SLAs. So that's VMware Continuent. Again, it offers high availability and DR for MySQL and Oracle databases. Then we have advanced networking services powered by NSX. So coming soon, we will have the capability to offer these advanced networking services. It gives you a very granular network security, dynamic routing, expanded network scaling, load balancing, and point-to-point VPN. And ultimately, it's going to give you that security, simplicity, and flexibility in an enterprise-class networking service. So that is coming up in the future, so keep your eyes open for that. Currently, we have the vRealize Air Compliance Beta. So here's some links for the information regarding this beta. vRealize Air Compliance, again, for those companies and agencies that have to meet certain compliance and security standards. We're now going to be able to offer that out in the cloud using our vCloud Air services. And the vRealize Air Automation, much like our vRealize Automation for your on-premise that you may be familiar with, we also have that in a beta right now as well for vRealize Air, to where we'll have the capabilities of that automation out on our vCloud Air service. And here's the information associated with that as well. So that completes this session on vCloud Air use cases. And I thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.